Hello, Thrive Tribe. Welcome back to another podcast of Warrior Voices. Today, I'm super excited to have a trauma survivor warrior. Her name is Marge, and she has a story for you, just a lifetime of trauma, not only being a victim of domestic abuse, but also a victim to finding ways to abuse herself. Is that fair to say, Marge?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with me, and more so for being so brave to share your story.
Thanks for having me, Jamie. I'm
You're
looking forward
welcome.
to it.
Yes. And Marge is a trauma survivor ambassador for the program. So, she has a big desire to take her story and try to inspire other trauma survivors that can relate to her story. So, today, our hope is to get some of her story out and what she has done to get through some of this trauma. I also want to say that you were recently a client of mine through coaching, and it was a wonderful experience with you and getting through some of your most recent trauma. And at the end of it, I kind of want to, talk a little bit about your victory that you just recently had, but we'll wait to get to that part. So let's go back to like your childhood. I kind of want to get a feel for where your trauma started and how.
Okay. Well, I grew up in a very abusive family. My dad is a Vietnam vet, and he had just recently came back from Vietnam when he met my mom, and they started popping out kids right away. My dad never dealt with any of his trauma and what he dealt with at Vietnam, and he also had a very rough childhood. My dad was kidnapped by his biological father. He was abused himself. So he had no way of coping or dealing with any of his anger or any of his pain, and he took it out on my mom and his kids. I had 3 older brothers. They were horribly abusive to me. My dad would fight with them, and they'd beat the crap out of each other, and then they'd come beat me up. I grew up thinking I was fat. I was told my whole life that I was a fat, ugly pig. Nobody'd ever want me. I got slapped around. I got my hair pulled. I got punched. I got beaten up. My doors got kicked in on my bedroom door. And it just went on until I was like 14 or 15 years old. And my response to that trauma was, and I was also molested at about between the ages of like 7 to 10 by one of my older brothers. And that kind of set the cue for my whole life. I started searching to fill that void of emptiness in my heart for a man. And I started at a very young age. At 13 years old, I was sexually active, and I was tossed around like a sack of potatoes till I was 19 years old by men much older than me, men that had no business being involved with me. And they did things to me that were unspeakable. I
Wow.
was raped. I was raped more than once, several times. And that was just kind of how I dealt with the pain of my dad and what I was dealing with at home was going out and trying to find the love of a man from anybody who would give it to me. And what I
Well,
ended up finding was I got pregnant at 19.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. So, first of all, I can't imagine the life that you lived and going through that trauma, in within your family. It's like, when you're a child, those people are the ones that are supposed to protect you.
mhm,
And, to me, it makes complete sense that as you got older, being sexually assaulted, that then turned into a skewed vision of what love is and
mhm,
what sex really supposed to be for and what it's meant for. And also, I feel that children that go through sexual abuse also learn to use their body as a way to receive love. And
yes,
I can hear that coming through your story, and it can lead to, yeah, definitely a life of trauma. And so again, I'm really sorry. No child should ever go through what you went through. And I think it's important to talk about this because you said, your dad had trauma and he was abused. And we talk about breaking that cycle, right? And so he took what he learned and then taught your brothers and yourself, all at the same time as abusing your mother, all he knew. right? And what he knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that because I think it's just really, really important for our viewers to know that even with a story as tragic as yours, that there is life after trauma. So I know right away, being pregnant at 19 and stuff like that, that you still found yourself in very toxic relationships and addiction, right? So, talk
Yeah.
to me about that. After you're 19, you got out of the home, you started your own family. What happened then?
Well, I had no idea what I was doing. I was a 19-year-old single mom, um, left with a baby. I had no idea how to take care of. But I did it and I survived. And I went to college and I forced myself to try to get myself out of that situation. I ended up meeting my first husband when my daughter was 3 months old, and he was sexually abusive. He cheated on me all the time and he wanted me to be a swinger and he got me into things that were stuff that I didn't agree with. And I did it to save my marriage. He promised me the world that he'd never cheat on me and he'd be with me forever if I did these things. So I did. So not only did I use my body, to get what I wanted, I had very big breasts at a young age, and I was very sexually outspoken, I
Hmm.
guess, at a very young age because I had heard people talk about it and my brothers talk about it, and I thought I knew what I was talking about, but I really had no idea what I was talking about. So anyhow, I ended up pregnant at 19 and I was in college and I met my first husband and we made it 13 years, but the whole time we were together, I was a drunk. I was in so much pain. Physically, I have a disease called neurofibromatosis, and I developed tumors in my leg. I just actually had one removed a couple weeks ago, and I have a softball size hole in my leg right now. So
Wow.
not only have I dealt with alcoholism, abuse, trauma, um, horrible things in my life, I also have debilitating health problems. Um, so I stayed with my first husband for a really long time because I was taught you don't leave no matter how bad it gets. My mom was choked in front of me. My mom was slapped in front of me, and she stayed. I used to beg my mom to leave my dad, and she wouldn't. And so I was taught at a very young age that you take the abuse and you stay for your family. And I did that, and I stayed with my first husband until I would have died if I would have stayed with them any longer. Um, we were living in Arizona and he basically told me that he slept with the neighbor while I was at work one day, and he thought that it would, like, turn me on because that's how dis screwed up he was in his mind in the sex. He
Hmm.
thought he thought by him sleeping with the neighbor, he could tell me the gory details and I would be turned on by it, and I wasn't. I was repulsed. So I packed up my 2 kids, and I had nothing but the clothes on my back, and I moved back here to my mom and dad's house, and I started rebuilding my life. I spent 2 years living in my parents' two-bedroom house, and, I was drunk the whole time. I left my kids alone with my mom and dad. Sorry, Imma try not to cry throughout this, but I know I'm gonna.
No, that's
It
okay. It just
it's
shows the raw,
painful.
real emotions, and that's what this podcast is all about, is just being real, girl. And
Yeah.
I don't want anybody to mask because, people can relate to your story, and it is, and to me, crying is a great release. So please,
Well,
you do you, girl.
it was a very, very painful time of my life, and my alcoholism was in full effect. I would leave my kids home alone with my mom and dad, and I would go to the bar and get drunk and pick up men and sleep with them and just was desperately trying to fill the hole in my heart that losing my husband of 13 years, I thought I was gonna spend the rest of my life with them. Um, I thought I was gonna die. I thought my life was over, and, I loved him so much, and I really truly believed that I was gonna spend the rest of my life with him, and, thank God I'm not. Thank God I didn't, and I got out, but it took me several years of just being a drunk and I never moved on. I never truly moved on until I worked the steps of AA and forgave him and saw what my character defects are and what I did in that relationship. to ruin it and to make it work. Everything, I had to come clean with the fact that I allowed a man abuse me for 13 years. And that was my fault. And it took me another 10, 12 years after well, shoot, it's been 20 to forgive him because I held on to it and I held on to it and I just drank it away instead of seeing a counselor or, working the steps or finding God. I chose to be a drunk for 15 years and
So
wallow in that misery.
what did drinking do for you as far as like related to your trauma? Why do you feel like you chose to drink instead of going counseling or finding help?
'Cause it's easy. It's easy. There's alcohol on every single corner, and it's cheap, and it would numb the pain, and when I'm drinking, I can let loose, and I can have fun, and I'm laughing, and I feel sexy, and I feel like I'm on top of the world when I'm drinking. I'm funny, and I'm cute, and I feel like I'm just a different person. I feel like I can let loose and I can be Marge. But what I've found throughout my recovery is that's not who I am. Who I am is who sits before you today. That was broken. That was broken Marge. That was me trying to numb the pain of all the years of abuse that I went through.
So I want I want to tell our audience it was kind of funny because I knew that Marge had is in recovery. She's a recovering alcoholic, as I am. So I thought for sure of like, well, I'm gonna wear my sober as fuck shirt today for this podcast because we're both in recovery and I've got my coins right here and I'm proud to be in recovery. And Marge gets on and we're talking before I hit record. And she's like, well, I was going to wear my, so wait, I didn't think it was going to be appropriate. Hold on. And she runs to her bedroom. She comes back and she puts her sober as fuck shirt on. So we are here to represent recovery works, right? Even after
Yes.
trauma. I want you to tell our trauma survivors or anyone that's going through addiction right now or is in recovery, like what made you? Because to me, the decision to quit drinking was harder than not drinking. So, what got you to that point where you're like, enough is enough? I need to get sober.
Okay. So back to my story about my ex-husband. So I was with him for 13 years. We were separated for a couple years, and then I met my second husband. And my second husband was a raging alcoholic. And I ended up in the hospital at the end of that marriage. I had ulcerative colitis. They were going to remove a foot of my colon. I had lost my job. I was in a bipolar mania. I was addicted to Oxycontin, and I decided I was just going to quit one day. And I went through horrific withdrawals. One of my best friends died. My son moved to Arizona. I lost my job. My car got repossessed. My husband left me, and this was all in the course of about 3 weeks. So
Oh,
I ended up in the psych ward at the hospital, and I was there for 3 weeks. And I found out that I was bipolar. I had no idea I was bipolar. I was in a bipolar mania, and it took much, much medication for me to snap out of that. And so I kicked my husband out, and my second marriage was over, and I was devastated. I thought I was gonna spend the rest of my life with him. Here is this good man. We have a lot of fun together. He worked in the oil field, so we had plenty of money to do whatever we wanted. And I was still miserable. I was drunk every day. And when he was gone, he worked in the oil field. I was drunk. So that marriage failed because of both of our alcoholism. But the point of what I'm getting at is I was told at that time, 12 years ago, that I needed to quit drinking because I had ulcerative colitis and I was drinking so much that I was going to kill myself. And I was like, you guys
no.
don't know shit. I don't drink that much. And I carried on for another 12 years. And I ended up meeting my third husband 5 years ago, who was also an alcoholic. And we spent the first year and a half drinking together and partying together and fighting. And it was horrible. It was a horrible, horrible, horrible toxic relationship. We were on again, off again, on again, off again. And then on December 17th, 2021, he assaulted me. He choked me, he spit on me, he punched me in the face, he threw me on the bed, he took my phone and wouldn't give it to me so I could call 911. And after he finally passed out, he smashed my house all up. There were holes all over my walls, and I was terrified. And this wasn't the first time this happened. It happened several times, but I never called the police because I didn't want him to go to jail. So finally, he fell asleep that night, and I called the police and I told them what happened and what he did to me, and they arrested him for domestic violence. He was already on parole or probation for a DUI. So it was a double whammy. So he was facing two felonies. I woke up the next day on December 18th. I have a tattoo. I don't know if you
Mhm.
can see it or not, but my tattoo is my sobriety date and a phoenix.
Yeah.
Because the phoenix represents rising from the ashes, and I believe that that day after that happened, and I decided to get sober the next morning, my whole life changed. I left old Marge behind. Um, so anyhow, I woke up the next day and he was in jail and he was facing 5 years. And I was done. I was done with that relationship. I was never taking him back, right?
Right. Right. Famous
And
words.
I decided it was time to change. I was sick of being miserable. I was sick of being sick, and I was sick of my life being completely fucked up. I didn't want to live like that anymore. And I had no idea the adventure that I was about to go on when I gave my life to God and I decided to get sober. I had no idea the changes that would happen in my life that day. So I started going to AA meetings, and I would go every day. Every day when I first got sober, I was there 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day.
Wow.
And my AA house has this cool thing called an alkathon, where at the holidays they're open 24 hours a day. So I was there. I got December 17th is the day I got sober. Like 2 days later is when the alkathon started, and I sat there every single day for every meeting. I listened, and I got a sponsor, and I started working the steps. And lo and behold, my whole life I've had this victim mentality. I'm a victim. Everybody has hurt me. These people did this to me. This person did that to me. My husband this, my husband that. And I carried that victim mentality around until recently, honestly, when I worked with you and I worked with my sponsor, and I realized that I am a victim, yes. There were some horrible, unfortunate things that happened to me as a child and in my marriages that I didn't have control over. And I was a victim. I was an innocent child. I was a young woman. I was a young mom, and I didn't deserve any of that stuff to happen to me. But what my part in it was that I carried it around for 30 years, 40 years. I let it victimize me over and over and over again because I never healed the parts of me that were broken from the abuse. And not only did I take it out on my children, I took it out on my mom, my dad, my siblings that I couldn't forgive. They were just kids too. My brothers were only doing what they were taught. I had to learn to forgive them for abusing me because it wasn't their fault. They were just kids too. But I carried that around with me my whole adult life, that I was this victim and I hated everybody and I was mad at everybody. And why was I born? And why did my mom decide she wanted to have a girl after having three boys? And I used to say those things to my mom. Why did you have me?
Wow.
And until I was able to accept that I'm the cause of my own problems, ultimately, um,
Well, I
I,
want to clarify and tell me if I'm wrong. It's because I want to make sure you're not saying this was all my fault. Because getting abused and
no,
the sexual abuse is not your fault. But what you just said was so freaking powerful. And that it was because of your unhealed trauma. And that's really why I started this program, is because my daughter had a lot of unhealed trauma, and she suffered immensely until she passed away. And so my mission in life is to talk about things like this,
yeah,
because I think that is the key, is that we have to heal from our trauma so the trauma doesn't continue,
yeah,
and just control our entire life. But I also want to say too, Marge, that I'm incredibly inspired by you, and the stuff that you've gone through, and my heart aches for you, but it also is like just bursting with excitement to see what your future holds. And with your sobriety, you're doing your coaching, and you have your sponsor and things like that. And what when you do find some true healing, which I know you're at the beginning stages of your healing, because you just got out of your well, I'm gonna say your last toxic relationship. Um,
Yeah.
so so now you've gotten sober and your husband, or the abuser is sent to prison, you said for 5 years. Take me from there. So you're new in
Okay.
sobriety, you've this
So
man is
I'm
in prison.
okay. So I didn't know what the outcome was going to be that night when I called the police. I would have probably still done it, but I didn't realize that he was looking at another felony. I didn't know he had 2 domestic violences prior to me. I did know, but I'm not familiar with the court system because I've never really been in trouble. I have 2 DUIs from when I was a young kid, but I have never been in trouble. So I didn't understand that I made that phone call and somebody was going to go to jail that night. They don't
Right.
come to your house for a domestic and leave with nobody in the car. So I had no idea what this whole making that phone call was going to turn into. So anyhow, I break up with him because of that night, and they let him out of jail, and he can't come home. So I don't remember where he went and stayed. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. He wasn't home. He didn't come home, and he begged me, "Please, I'll never do this again." I don't know if anybody has ever heard those words before, but it's all bullshit. I'll never do it again. I love you so much. I'm going to take care of you. You're not going to have to work, which is my big thing is that there's going to come a point in my life where I can't work. I'm going to be disabled. And I dream of having a man who will take care of me so that I don't have to be homeless, you know? And he played on that. He played on that. And he promised me when I get out of jail, I'm only going for 6 months. I'm only going for 6 months. I won't be gone long, blah blah blah. Well, he ends up getting 21 months. And my dumbass didn't just stay with him. I supported him like a king while he was in prison.
Oh.
He had the best shoes, he had the best TV, he had the best headphones, he had music, he had food, he had clothing, he had anything at his disposal. I made sure he had it so that he wasn't suffering while he was in prison.
So
But
what do you
I was
think
out here
made
eating
you do
ramen
that?
noodles. What's that? Go ahead.
What made you do that? What made you support your abuser in prison? And do you feel like that to me, to me, that is your learned behavior, and you're still, because you're unhealed at this point, that's still, you still have that need to have a man take care of you and to love you and to make you feel complete, to fill that hole.
Mhm.
You're still thinking you're I guess your mindset is still unhealthy at this point, and
Yeah,
that's what
very.
led you to do that.
Well, I loved him. I
Mhm.
thought it was love. I thought it was an obsession. It was not love. It was not love at all. It was addiction. It was my addiction in full-blown
Mhm.
addiction. I was addicted to the trauma. I was addicted to the chaos. I was addicted to the love bombing. I was addicted to him. I was addicted to the sex. I was addicted to the "you're beautifuls," the "you're I'm gonna take care of yous," the "you're such a wonderful person." I mean, he mind fucked me so bad. I was delusional. I had no idea what love. I still don't know what love is, but at that point in time, um, I didn't have a clue that I was
Right.
being abused at that point still, because that was so common to me to be treated that way that I let a lot of things go and I overlooked a lot of things just for the sake of having him in my life
Well,
because it was
I'm guessing him being in prison for 21 months, he couldn't physically abuse you or destroy your home and do the things like he did that night. So all you probably got for that 2 years essentially was the love bombing, and,
yes,
and the more he did it, the more you gave to him, and,
yes,
funded his, whatever. And so that I could see that. I could see that because
yes.
he's not a direct threat, to get what he wants. He knows exactly how to manipulate your mind.
Yes, and he did just that. I mean, he promised me the world. So anyhow, we go through 21 months of him in prison and he gets out and we lasted, let's see, he got out in October and we broke up in March. because he relapsed. He was promised me he was gonna stay sober. I found out that the whole time that he was in prison, he was drinking and he was using Suboxone, which he lied to me and told me that he was sober that whole time. So I'm thinking I'm getting this sober guy who's been rehabilitated from prison. He took all the classes. He did all the work. He got baptized. He promised me I'm a different person. I'll never abuse you again. I'll take care of you. I promise, 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 promise. He promised me the world. And when he got out, things were okay for a while until he stopped getting the Suboxone and then he started drinking again, which didn't take very long. And we ended up getting into a fight and I kicked him out. Within a couple weeks, he went and met a new girl and got into a relationship with her right away, moved in with her, and I ended up going on and getting into a relationship with another abuser, a total junkie, drug addict, piece of crap that abused me horribly. I was so broken when we broke up. I thought I'm never going to meet anybody again. And I think this every time. Every time I'm single, I think I'm never going to meet anybody. I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. And this man used me and abused me financially, emotionally, mentally. He never put his hands on me, thank God. But it was just another crappy relationship.
Right. And so
So
far that's
anyhow,
because that's all you know. And
yeah.
the sad, devastating part about this, Marge, is that, and I learned this even from my daughter. She was asked why did she go from one toxic relationship to the next, and myself. I didn't get my first healthy relationship until I was in my mid 40s. And it's because you're more comfortable in the chaos,
Mhm. That's all I
and
knew.
it's all and I know that doesn't make sense to a lot of people that have not been through the trauma that we've experienced, but it is, you feel out of place if things are normal,
Mhm.
because it's not normal to us. Normal is not normal to trauma survivors, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing too, I think it's important to know that it's very common and that a person will leave a domestic violence relationship 7 times on an average of 7 times before they're gone for good. So it makes sense that you did go back, and it makes sense that you believed all the things that he was saying, when he was manipulating you, because your soul just craves that, and I think deep down we know it's a bunch of bullshit, but we'll take it for what it is. And
Yeah.
that 2 years that he was able to be the nice guy when he was in prison, you hold on to that because that's considered good times, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But
Yeah, I was happy.
looking back, you're like, of course it was good. I was supporting him. I was doing all these things for him, and he wasn't being tested in real life, you know?
Yeah.
So now because I really want to focus on letting the survivors know with that amount of trauma, um, what are some of the things you want to tell them to encourage them to break that cycle, and if they're leaving a domestic violence relationship, how important it is to heal before you do get into the next relationship.
Well, that the relationship that I'm just getting out of, it ultimately ended with him abusing me again. And this time it was the ice that took all the cake, or however you want to say it. He totaled my truck. He abused me. He threatened to kill me. He ended up in jail again for a sixth DUI and for making and threatening and intimidating on a phone because he left me voicemails threatening to kill me. So I called the cops again, got him arrested again, and threw him out. And this time I sold all his stuff to get some of my money back, recoup for all the loss.
Yeah, good
So
for
now
you.
I'm the villain. I'm the villain because I sold his stuff. It doesn't matter that he cost me a $25,000 truck. It doesn't matter that I spent thousands of dollars of him when I was in prison, that I racked up thousands of dollars of credit cards. I'm the villain because I sold $2,000 worth of tools.
Of
So
course.
anyhow, he ended up going to jail and I blocked the jail number. I blocked his number. I blocked everything. And 6 days later, I get a text message from someone that he's on the beach with a girl. So they sent me a picture and I don't recognize the girl. So I text him and I'm like, what the hell? I get no response. So he immediately found his next victim. And long story short, I had court against him, not against him, but I had to make my victim impact statement last Tuesday. And she showed up. And all I can think to myself is that poor girl. She has no idea what she's in for. He's going to prison. He's got a 6 DUI. He got sentenced to 6 months for the communications device, which is going to keep him in jail until he gets sentenced again on the 10th for the DUI. And that's when he's going to prison. And all I can think to myself is, I don't hate her.
Mm.
I don't hate her. My heart goes out to her. I feel so bad that she's getting what I got when we were first together and he was in and out of jail and he was in and out of rehab. Baby, I'm going to take care of you. I promise I'm only going to get 6 months. He's getting 2 years in prison. I already talked to the prosecuting attorney and they're going to give him the max. So that's 23 months. So she's going to support him and pay for all his commissary and take care of his bills and take care of all his life, just like I did. And I so wish I could reach out to her and be like, this is what I went through and he's going to do the same thing to you. But you know what? She's not going to listen. We
Yeah,
don't listen.
we
I,
don't
sh-
listen.
I had so many people tell me he was bad and he was bad for me and I didn't listen. But what changed for me was working the steps and realizing and working with Jamie and realizing that this is abuse. I used to minimize it so bad. His eyes turned black and I didn't know if I was going to live or die in that room that day. And I laughed about it
Mm.
because it was so traumatizing. That was the only way I could deal with it. I had no idea the extent of the abuse that I went through until I talked to Jamie, until I talked to Jeanette, until I talked to my counselor, until I talked to my sponsor about what was truly going on. Because in my mind, I deserved it because I
Wow.
felt like I was a failure, because I felt like this was the best I could do. Bobby was the best I could do. I couldn't get any better. So when it changed for me and I decided that it was finally over was the day that I threw his stuff out and he called me a fat fucking whore and told me he was going to kill me and he was going to burn my house down. I finally just had enough. I told him the time before that, this is the last time you ever call me a whore.
Mm.
And if you do it again, I'm done. So we got married March 21st, and I filed for divorce on March 30th, 9 days later. That's how long my marriage lasted. I got tired of being abused. I got tired of being degraded. I got tired of being told I was a fat fucking whore and that I was sleeping with everybody. My nervous system was shot. I had um I have an autoimmune disease that was in a complete flare up because of all the stress, and I couldn't get it to go away. I couldn't get it to go away for months because of the stress that I was dealing with. And
Let me
just
ask you this.
constantly.
You're still sober today. So how did you stay sober during this abusive, mentally and physically abusive relationship where you're still processing all of this trauma and you're still healing and trying to find new coping skills uh, versus going back to drinking? Like what kept you from that?
Well, this tattoo means a lot to me.
Hmm.
And I don't want to break that. I don't want to have the state on me that means nothing. The day that I got sober, I got on my knees and I asked God to remove the desire to quit drinking from me, and He did. And ever since, I've had no desire to drink. I know for me that alcohol is going to kill me if I drink again. I won't come back. I won't make it back to the rooms. And I don't want that. I have 5 grandbabies that worship the ground I walk on. I have a daughter that, is amazing. I have a son that hasn't talked to me in almost 4 years. But I hold on to hope that if I continue on this journey and he sees that I'm making these changes, that he'll give me a chance to be a part of his life.
Yeah. And
Um,
here's the thing, Marge, when you look at that tattoo, you made the choice to do something very loving and kind for yourself that day and the day you became sober. And when you're going through trauma and hard times and you look at that, tattoo, you got to remind yourself you're the only person that can take that away from you too. And
Yeah.
that's what I talked about by like we become our own worst abusers when sometimes when we're dealing with trauma in an unhealthy way. And that's one for telling ourselves lies and believing the lies that, people like he called you all kinds of names and said all kinds of things and it's believing those things and then telling ourselves things like I need a man to survive or I'm not worthy, I'm not deserving. Those are ways that we internalize and we become our own worst abusers. But as far as your son goes, I'm glad you are keeping hope because. But here's the hard truth, and like even coaching with me, I always say, okay, here's the hard truth. Is that, and I speak for myself too when we drank and when we did the I'm sorries, and this is not going to happen again to our children or to people that loved us, we taught them to not believe us because then next thing you know, we're drunk again or,
Yeah.
we're making another mistake. And so, he is protecting himself. And people have to do that, and it's going to take time. And he probably sees from afar that you are still dealing with domestic violence, right? And unhealthy
Yeah.
relationships. And so I feel like he's doing this to protect himself, which sometimes we
Yeah.
have to do.
Yeah.
Um, so I do believe that if you keep on this journey and you continue on your path of healing and you start creating a different mindset of I am worthy, I am deserving, you're going to bring in the people that are respectful and that know what true love really is
Yeah.
and show you a different way than all the things that you've had to tolerate up to here. So what is you what are your plans um to move forward from this latest trauma? What are you going to do to love yourself?
Well, I'm going to continue my counseling. I have counseling once a week. I'm going to continue my journey on sobriety. I read daily devotionals for other women on TikTok. I'm just going to continue going to meetings and continue doing stuff like this that makes me feel empowered and working with other women who've been through domestic violence or who've been through alcoholism. That's my journey in life now, is to share my story so that other women can see that there is a way out. There is life after abuse. There is life after addiction. It's tough. It's really tough. There's days that I don't want to get out of bed every day. I wake up every day and I'm like, damn it, I'm here again. But I get up and I fight and
Mhm,
I continue to love the people that love me and stand by my family. My mom has stage 4 cancer right now, and they're giving her a year to a year and a half to live. So my focus right now is my mom, my dad, who's gonna need me when his wife dies. He's 83 years old. He doesn't even know how to wipe his own butt, you know?
mhm.
But I'm just one day at a time is all I can do. I literally live by the one day at a time because I can't focus on my past. My past is gone. I have no idea what my future is going to bring. I'm hoping that someday I have a normal, healthy relationship. But if I don't, and I end up single for the rest of my life, I'd rather be single than to be abused by somebody for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
And
single
I'm
and
gonna have
safe.
to accept that. Yeah, I'm gonna have to accept that, you know, I'm okay single. Cause like you said, I've never felt complete without a man. I've always felt like, and society teaches women that if we're not married and we don't have children, we're not worthy.
Yeah, I
And
agree with that. But I think most importantly, Marge, is, and I say this to you and anyone else that might be in a situation similar to yours, is I really feel your next step is to learn to love yourself. And
Mhm.
because that is why you desire a man to make you feel complete, but you wouldn't need that if you learn to love yourself. And when you learn to love yourself, you will not tolerate any of that behavior that you have witnessed so far for your entire life. So I really feel like now is the time that you say, I heard you say your dad is your priority, but you need to be your priority so you can be there in a healthy way for your mom and your dad. And you have a chance in the next year that your mom is with you to give her some peace that her daughter, that she has witnessed so far, lived 30 years in abuse, has found love for herself. What a freaking gift you could give your mother.
Mhm.
You have a year and a half, right, to do that.
Yeah.
And I really think now is the time for you to learn to love yourself, embrace your story, and you are by being a trauma survivor ambassador and by doing things like this, and on your TikTok and sharing your story. That is going to help you heal, and that is going to teach you that my story matters, and I have a strength and I have a gift to give others for inspiration and to make them feel less alone so people don't have to suffer in silence anymore.
Mhm.
So you've been given a gift to be able to do that because you're brave enough to share your story, and you do it so boldly and you do it so raw. That's why I was excited to have you on here, because you give no shits. You say exactly how it is, and you're willing to have the accountability. Remember, like, we talked a lot about accountability in our coaching, and that's where your power's at, right? And
Mhm.
so I do hope that you start finding ways to learn to love yourself. And whether that's finding other podcasts to listen to, Google it, ChatGPT it, whatever it is, like, how do I learn to love myself after a lifetime of violence and abuse? Because that is when you're really, really going to start healing and breaking the cycle of finding yourself in other toxic relationships, that where if you do, that it's no longer your comfort zone, that you
Mhm.
know something's wrong, you
Mhm.
know? So, just super powerful stuff, Marge. Where can anyone find you? Like you said, you talk about the stuff on your TikTok. Do you know your TikTok handle offhand, or you can
I
send it to me and I can put it in the description?
Yeah, I think it's Master MDD, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
But yeah,
You
and
send that
if
to me and I
anybody
can,
wants to reach out, you're more than welcome to, give my phone number out, or I would love to have other women in my life that need help that have gone through this that I can support.
I really appreciate that. And I'm sure people are out there just inspired by you because, like I said, first of all, you getting sober, especially while you're still in the midst of trauma and abuse, and staying sober. I loved that you said that you had given your life to God and that you had asked Him to take away the craving of drinking, right? And I believe that. And so, like, maybe you didn't go right to, okay, I need a drink to handle this, but you you are responsible for your sobriety, right?
Mhm.
You have to give yourself credit that you are still sober today after just going through this tumultuous, very devastating time in your life. You stayed sober through that because of you.
Mhm.
And I didn't hear you give yourself any credit, and I want to make sure, yes, pat yourself on the back, because as much as we can say all the things and give it to God and do all these things, and I believe in those things, and it's helped keep me sober as well, but what I've learned to do was give myself credit as well.
Mhm.
Because when I'm disappointed, when I lost my daughter, I didn't really ever question my faith, but I questioned my faith, kind of thing, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
if I was to give all the credit away for my sobriety, I feel like that would set me up to relapse as soon as somebody else disappointed me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm in charge of my sobriety. I'm in charge of my mental health. I'm in charge of my healing. And when I can do that, then nobody can take it away from me. No
Yeah.
situation can. So, well, is there anything else that stands out to you that you want to say to trauma survivors that may be currently in a domestic violence situation or in addiction? Um, how do they get out safely?
Well, there's only 3 ways to get out of addiction: going to jail, going to an asylum, or dying. And those are your options. That's where it's gonna lead. So if you're stuck in addiction, find a meeting. Find other people that are in alcohol, that are addicted to the same drug as you are, that are in recovery. Um, and as far as like anybody in a domestic violence relationship, it never gets better. It only continues to get worse as time goes on. And as you continue to allow your abuser to think that what they're doing to you is okay, they're going to continue to do worse things to you and worse things to you because they know they can get away with it. So my advice is to get out. I know how hard it is. I know it's scary. Thinking about being alone and if you have kids, it's even scarier, but I don't want my daughter thinking that it's okay to be treated like this. Thankfully, my daughter has an amazing husband who's not abusive to her in any way, shape, or form. He worships the ground she walks on, but she made a conscious effort to not be like her mom.
Wow. So I think that's
So,
really important because you said like it's very difficult to leave when you have children, and I agree with you because you think, how am I going to make it on my own? How am I going to support these children? But look at what I'm talking to my Thrive tribe and anyone that's in a domestic violence situation right now. Look what happened to Marge when she grew up in a domestic violence situation and her mom stayed. It led Marge a lifetime of skewed vision of what love is. It gave her no
yeah,
self-worth. It gave her a comfort of abuse. Abuse was a comfort zone for her.
yeah,
So, if anything, that especially if you have children, now is the time to get out because it is
yes,
abuse to your children to stay in that situation. But I do have to say that um, you need to reach out to some kind of shelter or resource center. Like I talk a lot about Haven, they help with um, escape plans, safety plans on how to leave safely. So I think, remember, and I told you this, Marge, as well, and you said you followed it, and it was really helpful when you went to court. But call every resource place you can and get as much advice as you can and get as many advocates on your side. Get other people that has gone through something like this to stand by your side. Build yourself an army so you can feel safe when you leave and empowered.
yes,
The more people you have, the more empowered you feel. So when you make that decision to leave, you follow through with it, right?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
yep.
Well, I appreciate you being here with me today and being. I mean, obviously, this was very emotional for you to dig up some of that trauma and that pain. And a lot of it's because it's still new, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I honestly believe being an ambassador and being so outspoken about your sobriety and talking to other women about it is going to be a key in your healing. And you're doing it as a survivor, not as a victim. So that's super important. But thank you so much for being here.
Thanks,
Um,
Jim.
to my Thrive Tribe, you're welcome. To my Thrive Tribe, I will put in Marge's like her TikTok handle and things like that in the description. But if you like this episode, please make sure you like, subscribe, share with anybody that that you feel can relate to this. Hopefully, it'll bring some inspiration to them so they can start their healing journey. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye bye.